morning we're going to talk about two very important areas: transformation and spiritual gifts. And I can remember that when I was just 17 years old, God began to work in my life and began to transform me. And as I opened up His book and began to read, He began to change my desires. And all those old, cruddy, sinful desires that I had mastered as a high schooler, I became a believer at the end of my senior year in high school. They began to become unimportant to me, and that which I didn't want to do or didn't want to be. And unfortunately for me, I had done enough sinning up to that point that though God was transforming me, my spiritual backbone still looked kind of curved like this. And over the years, he's kind of like straightened it out a bit. But it does have an impact on us when we have gone through so many things in our life and we've kind of mastered the art of sin, that when God transforms us, it takes a lifetime for Him to actually conform us into the image of Christ and make us what He wants to make us. But as soon as I came to Christ, I wanted to share what I knew about Him with other people, and that became kind of like the rallying point of my entire life. And so in school, that was what I wanted to do, teaching Bible at the Christian school here in Lebanon, was to bring Christ to the students so that they could then experience transformation. And over the years, we saw a number of students become transformed. They came in, many of them, not a believer in Christ. They were hearing the gospel, some of them for the first or maybe a season of time where they had not heard about Christ, and they were coming to Christ. But there was this one student that Mike Reardon and I were extremely worried about. He was a foreign exchange student, very personable young man. We just enjoyed hanging out with him and talking to him, but he still had not committed his life to Christ. As a matter of fact, he was into things that indicated he was more or less wanting to go the way of the world. And my dear friend Mike Reardon just had this ability to guide and direct people down the right path. And even though he didn't make a commitment to Christ at Eastland that senior year, Mr. Reardon talked him into going to a small Christian liberal arts school in Mississippi. And when he went to that school, he continued to hear the gospel, and he got saved. He committed his life to Christ at that school, felt like God was calling him into the ministry, so he went to Bible college, and now he's pastoring a church in Mississippi. Transformation. And so that's what this book is about that we're going to be looking at the next several weeks, Life in Community. It's by a guy named Dustin Willis. And today we're going to talk about how God uses our community groups to transform our lives. I hope that you can say, I've been in a community group and it actually had an impact on the formation of my life, my ideas, my attitudes, and my life as I went along my path in life. I hope that's the case with you. I just love my community group. In a moment, a little bit, I'm going to talk about the spiritual gifts in my community group, but what I love about my community group is members in the group, I guess I would say it's not dependent on me. Members in the group minister to one another and spend time with one another outside the group and encourage one another outside the group. Then when we've come together as a group, it was natural for them to lift up one another in the group. And so as we've grown, I think what I've seen is people being very, very concerned for other people in the group. And I might miss, I'll miss a need in the group, and then someone will come up. As a matter of fact, probably 8 or 10 months ago, or maybe a little more, after church, someone came up and said, we need to pray for this person in our group because they're going through a really difficult time. We brought them up here. 3 of the guys in our group gathered around him. We prayed for him, and then he was able to make it out of a very dark time in his life. So I love my community group for that. One person cannot be the central factor in a community group. It has to be the group ministering and giving to one another. And that's what I love about my community group. Let's take a look at a key community group verse, a key verse in our life, Romans 12, 1 and 2. You can turn there in your Bible, and I think Andy will have it on the screen. This verse is smack dab in the context of community. It's kind of like the summary of the book of Romans up to that point, chapters 1 through 11. And now Paul's going to say, now that I've given you all this great teaching about what Christ has done, you've been justified by faith, suffering has a purpose in your life. All of the patriarchs in the Bible pointed to justification by faith, and there's no longer any condemnation for those of us that are in Christ Jesus. If God is for us, who can be against us? And then he comes to say, therefore, brothers, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God. In other words, now that you understand the gospel, the good news about Jesus, I'm appealing to you based on the good news as to how then we should respond to God and respond to one another. First of all, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. First step, committing my life to Christ. Today could be your day. Maybe your day was 50 years ago, but today could be your day. I'm going to take my body and I'm going to put it on God's altar once for all, and I'm committing my life to Christ. I'm giving it to Him. It's the biggest decision you'll ever make in your life, but it's the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life. And I want you to reflect back on the day that you did that, because what Paul's saying here is you do this once for all. You present your body as a living sacrifice once for all. And then he goes on to say this, holy and acceptable to God. In other words, I'm not doing this for my family. I'm not doing this for my friends. I'm not doing this to gain any kind of recognition for myself. I'm doing it for Christ, and I'm giving my life to Christ. I'm setting myself apart for Christ. And we all know that when we go to baptisms that people are getting baptized for a number of reasons. In other words, sometimes they get baptized because they feel a sense of peer pressure to get baptized. Or there's been a lot of talk about baptism, so they think, maybe I ought to get baptized. But they really don't understand why they're getting baptized. But as soon as someone understands why they're getting baptized, that they're setting themselves apart for God, then that baptism is extremely significant because they're being buried with Christ in baptism and raised with Christ as they come out of the water. Notice, this is our spiritual worship. This is the most important part of worship. I am giving my life to God. I'm setting myself apart for God. And then he goes on to say, do not be conformed to this world. Don't be pressed into the mold of this world. Don't be governed by advertisement. Don't be governed by social media. Don't be governed by peer pressure. Be governed by God. And don't be pressed into the mold of the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. In other words, where you were before you were a believer in Christ was a mind set on the flesh, a mind set on achievement, a mind set on recognition. I am the central part of my world, and the world revolves around me. But when we commit our life to Christ, we realize Christ is on the throne, and we are now to focus on Him and worship Him. This word transformed here is metamorphosis in the Greek. And again, the idea is this idea that there is this struggle before we come to Christ, is there not? There's this kind of tension where we're letting off the old man and putting on the new man. And I don't know anybody who's given their life to Christ where they said, boy, that was just a simple, easy process for me. It was no big deal. Usually it's a life-changing deal. Remember the day I committed my life to Christ, I was at a friend's house, a non-believing friend's house, and I said to him, today I'm going to give my life to Jesus in the evening, that evening. I was going to go to Calvary Chapel on a Saturday evening. I was going to give my life to Jesus. And the first thing he said without missing a beat was, don't you know what you're going to have to give up? And I was like, that was such a great question for me because it sounded like he was saying, You're going to have to give up all this garbage for something that's just as sweet as could be. That's what it sounded like to me. Because I had had a taste of what Christ could offer me, and I was going to give my life to Christ that night, but there was no lack of tension and struggle getting there that night. Most of you probably not been to Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa. They have these big beams that come down, and then they come into the middle of the aisles. Not the middle of the chairs, but the middle of the aisles. And I was so excited to go up front and give my life to Christ. I stood up and I turned and I smacked my face right into one of those beams. And I was kind of like, whoa, but I was going forward no matter what. Even if I was like half knocked out, I was going forward. I'll never forget, there was this kid on the ground there, looks up at me with a big smile on his face, and he said, man, you really want to get saved, don't you? And I said, absolutely, I want to get saved. It says, by the renewal of your mind, that by testing, that is when you're struggling, when you're fighting to come out of the cocoon, you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Transformation, I believe, at least this has been true in my life, happens through community. Jesus often spent time in people's homes. Remember, he called to Zacchaeus today, I'm going to spend some time in your home, Zacchaeus, coming over for lunch. And Jesus would often be in people's homes. God transforms us from a self-absorbed sin and sinful habits to a life of holiness, conforming us into the image of Christ, like Romans chapter 8 says. And so all of us come to the table, but we come from different places. I'll never forget, as long as I live, going to have dinner with my fiance's family at her house. Because you see, when I grew up, you only spoke at the table when you were spoken to. We didn't share opinions. We didn't share things about our life unless my parents asked about them or we'd talk about them. Otherwise, we just stared at each other and ate our food. Not a lot of talk at the table. My wife's family, on the other hand, it was like an all-out battle at the table, constantly. People sharing different opinions and going back and forth and sometimes even raising their voice. And I was sitting there like a deer in the headlights, man, like, what's going on here? And I asked her afterwards, I go, isn't that kind of disrespectful, like the way that everybody's talking? But the funny thing was this. They'd be battling it out, something about politics or something they believed in, battling out. And then somebody would go, hey, isn't it time to see the game? And they just get up and go in the other room and watch the game. Like nothing happened. And I'd just be sitting there going like, wow, what happened here? And I realized that actually my wife's family was much healthier than my family because they were getting things off of their shoulders with one another and sharing with one another. Whereas in my family, it was kind of like you speak when you're spoken to and that was it. Much different. So when you come to community group, we all come from different points of view. And it's our job, it's our situation to come to these groups and to give to them what we can bring to that group, but to encourage that group and to build it up. In community, we often meet Jesus followers who are further down the road from us. And these kind people give us an example of living whole, of living holy, and living under the authority of Christ. And I love that. These dear people provide positive peer pressure, according to Willis, which challenges us. He says this, the gospel is the driving force to our transformation, and community is the context where the greatest growth and revolution takes place. So let me ask you this. How has community group impacted you? And how have you impacted community group? Because it goes both ways, doesn't it? Several months ago now, I got very, very, very sick. And I know my wife, who's an RN, was concerned about my welfare. She thought that I could maybe even kick the bucket or die even. And so she'd stay up at night listening to me breathe. And I was sound asleep, so I had no clue that my respirations were like off the charts. And several times she had to wake me up at 1 or 2 in the morning and say, Steve, we've got to go to the hospital. And I'd say the same thing every time. No, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm doing fine. I just want to go to sleep. And we go to the hospital, and they'd hook me up to everything and take my blood and all that stuff. But during that time when I was sick, my community group rallied around me. When they said, we're praying for you, I knew they were praying for me on a daily basis. And they were following up and calling me and wishing me well and letting me know they were there for me. And then when I was in the hospital, they just showed their kindness and concern for me as well as my wife. Willis says community groups are especially important when you're at a low point in your life. Community groups are especially important when you're at a low point in your life. Maybe you're going through a divorce or trying to break a prescription drug habit, or you're looking for work, or a family member has died, or you feel like no one cares. It's in times like those where your community group comes around you and lets you know we're here for you. We're going to be with you through this difficult time in your life. And this kind of love is contagious. Jesus said he did not come for the healthy, but for the sick. And so once we find the healing for our souls, it's normal to share it with others who also need soul care. God uses our suffering to help others who suffer. And so in the next chapter, Willis extends the idea of transformation to the life of the church and spiritual gifts. The Bible makes it really clear that at salvation, each of us receives at least a spiritual gift for this number one reason, and really the main reason, which is to build others up. It's not to reflect on me, look at how good I am, look at what my gift is. And so the point of the gift is to build others up. The other night, Mindy and I were at dinner together, and we started talking about each of the people in our community group and what we thought their spiritual gifts were. It was a great little exercise, actually. We had fun doing it. And by the way, if there was a spiritual gift called goofiness, many of the people in my community group have that gift, but I haven't found that in the Bible. So there's no spiritual gift called goofy. But we have people that definitely have the gift of helps. We have people that have the gift of mercy. They're able to show compassion without being syrupy and mopey about it. We have people that have the gift of evangelism, which is really cool because they're always bringing up people that we need to pray for that are non-believers, and we're praying for non-believers in our group. We have people that have the gift of giving. Every time I have a barbecue, this one guy comes up and puts $20 in my pocket. I finally had to tell him, I said, look, I don't need your money. Quit giving me money. I just need your friendship. Just give me the friendship. And he put his $20 back in his pocket. He's got the gift of giving. He's always looking to give. Wherever he goes, he's looking to give. We have the gift of a word of wisdom, which is a word of wisdom would be like the ability for the moment to say something that meets the need of the moment. And we have 2 or 3 people in our community group that are spot on with that are able to offer to us what we need to hear from God, boom, right at the moment there, and give that to us. Now, spiritual gifts, you can find those in Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, and Ephesians 4. And again, all of them are for the building up of the body of Christ. And then let me say something which is kind of an important point, but a little bit tricky. So let me see if I can make this as clear as I can. Most spiritual gifts, if not all of them, are examples of what we should all do, but the person with the gift practices the gift more boldly. You might say man, they're really gifted at that. Like if somebody's in the hospital, send in so-and-so, they have the gift of mercy. And so all of us should be merciful, right? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. There's a level at which we all should be merciful, but the person with the gift of mercy is the person who has an extraordinary amount of grace to be able to be in situations that are very difficult, and they can offer mercy to people that are going through difficult things. Helps is a great example. Should we all be helping one another? Of course. But the person with the gift of helps, they go out of their way to help people. Somebody came to me a few weeks ago and said, "So are you going to family camp?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I have to. No, I want to go." And they go, "Well, where are you going to stay?" I go, "Well, I'm going to try to probably find a trailer. Somebody, I don't have one, I'll try to find one." He goes, "Well, I have one. And I will bring it up there and set it up for you, and you'll have this trailer and everything will be set up." And I was just like, wow, that is cool. Now, he could have said to me, like, "I have this trailer, if you can find like a truck to come and get it and go take it up to camp and all that," and then I would have had to do all that. No, this is a person who's gone over the top, has the gift of helps, and is now not only helping, but really helping. So we all need to help, but with someone with the gift of helps, it's just like you get up in the morning, you're like, who can I help? Who can I help? I want to help somebody. I want to be there for somebody today. You have the gift of helps, and you're there to help people all the time. Let's take one other one of these. Administration. That's a spiritual gift. Administration. That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're the kind of person who gets up in the morning and you got to organize everything from like the moment you get up. And you've got lists and sticky notes all over the house. And you're just always organizing and making sure everything's taken care of. You probably have the gift of administration, because who wants the gift of administration? I've been a teacher for a lot of years, and honest to goodness, I just feel sorry for administrators. I was one for a few years, and I realized I got to get back in the classroom. I cannot do this. Like, this is just too tedious for me. But there are people who have the gift of administration, dot every I, cross every T. Boy, they're going to administrate things. So when we have a community group get together or something with a community group for the following week, the people with the gift of administration are like, I'll organize that, or I'll plan the games, and I'll do all this stuff. I've got a few right here that have that gift. And it's so cool as a leader, because then those people are doing the work, they're administrating, and they're getting everybody organized, and you just sit back and go, okay, very good. Glad to be a part of this. That's great. So a question that you might think is an important question, but I don't know if it's really that important, is, so what spiritual gift or gifts do you have? And in a minute, I'll explain what I mean by that, because what are you saying? My spiritual gift's not all that important? It is, but not necessarily for you, but for other people. And so often when we talk about spiritual gifts or we do spiritual gift inventories, people go out of the class and go, I have the gift of mercy. I'm heading right over to the hospital. I'm going to pray for everybody in every room. And it becomes more about what they do than about their ministry of mercy that God has given to them. 1 Corinthians highlights that all of you are an important part of the body. Just as the members of our physical bodies are vital to one another, no member of the body of Christ can say they are not important just because they do not have the same function as someone else. As a matter of fact, the Spirit of God is the creator of body life, and He determines your role in the church. So a word to this community group leaders for a moment. Your goal is not to dominate your community group. You are not to be dominating your community group. Your goal is to orchestrate your community group so other people are talking and ministering to one another and giving to one another. And so if I dominate or I am the group because I'm kind of keeping it going, I have to learn to step back and allow the group to minister to one another. They have spiritual gifts. They need an outlet to exercise those spiritual gifts. So oftentimes, I'll just sit back and keep my mouth shut and let people talk to one another. So what's the best advice about using spiritual gifts? Find your gift in your community with other people. I'll never forget how Chuck Smith, pastor of Calvary Chapel, he would say, Greg Laurie was around here in the early days of Calvary Chapel, and he would say, what can I do to serve? What can I do to serve? He said, I'll scrub the toilets, Chuck, if you want me to. I'll clean the bathrooms, no big deal. Greg Laurie, do you know who Greg Laurie is? Most of us that know Greg Laurie say he's probably one of the most gifted evangelists in our lifetime, like in our generation. He has led hundreds of thousands of people to Christ. And yet, where he learned about and practiced the humility to be Greg Laurie was in the bathrooms of Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa, where he said, "Anywhere I can serve, Lord, I'd be glad to serve." And so, two things. You find your spiritual gift in the context of your community group, but in your serving and your attitude of service. It's not about me and it's not about you. It's not about our spiritual gift, but it's about being with people and allowing the Holy Spirit to use our spiritual gift in the context that we are using it in. It could be one-on-one. It could be a small group. It could be a prayer meeting. It could be on a Sunday morning when you run into people. But usually it's in the arena of community where we use our gift. The purpose of the spiritual gifts is to build others up. It's not, look at me, I have a spiritual gift. It's, look at Jesus and let's worship him and praise him together. Now, Willis emphasizes the importance of community groups surrounding those who are weak and supporting and bolstering the weaker brother or sister. And then he reminds us something very important. At any given time, any of us could be the weaker member. Any of us. He gives the story of a man who came to his church who was addicted to prescription drugs and was looking for answers to his problem. And instead of patting him on the back and saying things like, you know, we'll be praying for you. His name was Don. We'll be praying for you, Don. People called him up, invited him to their homes, went out to dinner with him, spent time with him. And the upshot of that story is that after several weeks, even though he was tempted to do drugs many, many times, because of the influence of the people in his community there at the church, he began to find the freedom of not doing drugs. I'm going to invite up Dave and Leanne Van Essen and Joe and Ellen Miner, and we're going to talk a little bit about their community groups and some of their experiences with transformation and spiritual gifts. Oh. Good morning. Here you go. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
So, to begin with, tell us a little, we'll see if we can do better this week, like when you meet, and give us an idea of like a typical community group evening, like an outline of like some of the things you guys do. Here, Dan.
We meet on Monday nights, okay. And we're not changing that. So
it's Monday?
Mondays.
Monday or
Mondays
never.
At 6. We get together at 6. We always have a meal. Patrick, you talked about last week how food matters. Right?
One of our values.
We've seen that, matters. Right? So food matters, and so kind of took that to heart. And for several years, right, have just purposed ourselves towards always having a meal and connecting over food. And I would say that takes up at least half of our time, if not more. And then typically we transition to more of a.
How's the discussion around the table, though? Is that pretty good between bites? Go ahead. She wants to say something.
We talk about everything. Like, there's no taboo topic. Religion, politics, like cultural issues, what we're learning in the Bible, like what's going on in people's lives. We talk about it all.
That's
Kids,
great.
Marriage.
Good. And what else do you do? I interrupted you, so what else? Most of the times at the table, sharing at the table.
Yeah, and then we transition to just kind of moving over into the living room and generally have some kind of a discussion around the sermon. Often it breaks down into managing kids. We have 17 kids in our community group, and they're all under age 11. So it's uniquely challenging sometimes.
Tell us about that, though. How do you manage that many kids? Like, what do you try to do to make it so that, like, you don't harm anybody?
Manage is a particular word. And it is
Damage control.
it's damage control, right? It's making sure the house is okay first and foremost, and then secondarily that kids are okay.
So you're like, that was a scream, but it wasn't like I'm a hurt scream?
No, that happens every week. Like,
Yeah.
we listen for the quality of the scream and then decide if we're going to act on it. Yeah. No, I mean, in all seriousness, right, we love having kids. We do kind of manage them. We have a really kind of big open space, so when they're in the house, we can kind of keep an eye on them, and then oftentimes they play outside when the weather's nice, and so.
Good.
Yeah, we do okay. It does decrease the ability to hear sometimes.
Yes.
So if you have hearing aids or you have problems hearing, maybe it would be challenging.
So would you say probably then a large part of ministry happens around the table while you're eating?
Yeah, I would say probably
Because when
most
you
of it.
say, okay, let's have a prayer time, it's kind of hard to have a prayer time when like it's, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Dave, you want to share about your group and a little bit about what you guys do?
Okay, our group meets Wednesday night at 6:30. We were doing Thursdays, but we moved to Wednesday. Our group is primarily we have no children. And we do not allow dogs and cats. We have a meal usually once a month, and then we quite often have a game night associated with that. And that's when everybody comes. The other evenings, generally we just have like a snack. So when people come, we stand around and visit. And, that kind of has to be, if we want to get into a study, we have to kind of stop that and get everybody to sit down and visit, go through a study, because our group likes to talk and visit, which is good.
It is good. What is it? I'll ask both of you, and then we'll ask Joe and Ellen. What is it about your community group that you enjoy the most? What do you enjoy the most about community group?
I'll let Leanne answer that.
What do I enjoy the most? I enjoy having people over. So I guess that's just something that inspires me and gives me energy and motivates me. And
You're gifted at hospitality, I know that.
well, I got a T-shirt this summer that said, "Not bossy, just aggressively helpful." So, and everybody seemed to agree with my T-shirt.
So you have the gift of administration, too.
I don't know. David said I needed one in every color, but anyway. So I like helping people. I like helping in hospitality. What do I enjoy? Probably just the opportunity to build friendships and the opportunity to really, sharpen each other, learn from each other, those
Great.
things.
Good. How about you guys? What do you enjoy most about your community group?
Probably the opportunity to get to know people I otherwise would never probably have a conversation with.
Right.
I think our church is just big enough, and then with the 2 services and with kids and all that, like actually most of the people I didn't know prior to them coming to our
Really?
community group,
Wow.
and I don't know that I would. Like, it's just...
And did you invite a lot of them? How did they get there?
Well, no, I don't invite people. That's the joke. Every time someone's
That's
like,
great.
I invited
How
people.
did you get here? Like, I didn't invite you.
Yeah, I'm like, why'd you invite more people? But then everyone that comes, I'm like, oh, like I wouldn't have gotten to know this person if they
Right.
weren't in my house.
So
and we didn't
people
get
are
that
inviting other people, obviously, then.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a problem.
Okay.
So I think that's, and getting to know those people at a deeper level, like getting to know what they're passionate about, what they're gifted at, what their interests are. So I think that's probably what I enjoy the most. Yeah, just really getting to know people and creating a space for them where they feel connected and can be real, be very
Excellent.
authentic.
What do you enjoy most, Joe?
I enjoy the way that my family really loves community group, and specifically my kids. Right, when we don't have community group, there's just a very real sense of disappointment.
Oh, wow.
And so it's Monday, and they're like, it's group day, and that matters, right? So the context for our kids to engage with other kids in a space that is good, a space that is safe, with people that we love and people that we trust, that matters a ton. And then maybe the second thing I enjoy being in the middle of dinner or in the middle of discussion, and then being able to step out or step away from the table and then just watch it all continue. Right? And so I don't feel the level of friendship that we have and the level of comfort that people have in our home typically facilitates me not having to be at the center. Right? And you talked a little bit about that, just the idea that, right, we're not meant to be, as community group leaders, in the middle, organizing and at the center of every conversation. And so it's really fun for me to be able to step back and then just watch everyone continue to engage and not feel like I'm doing something wrong by needing to go take care of a kid that's crying or something like that. And so just seeing life continue and being able to have that type of relationships is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and that shows that you have a gift of leadership, because leaders love to equip others and then let them go and let them do their thing. So it's great. What would you say is the biggest challenge besides the kids situation for you guys, or the thing that is the biggest challenge in your community group?
No, you took away my answer.
Say that again?
Yeah, I was going to say kids.
Okay, well, you can expand on that if you want.
No, so I think probably the biggest challenge is really working to engage on a spiritual level and in stuff that matters, because while the kids are loud and they're noisy, they also require a lot of you. And so there are times where I really wish that we could dive deeper into a particular topic, and it's just limited right now. And there's a sense in which I've had to step back and say, if dinner and life is all we get to, like that's good. And there are times where I would love to have more of a discussion or a longer discussion time, or where people felt like they could really engage in a particular discussion that matters more, and we're not always able to get there, and that's challenging. But I think there's also a sense in which you recognize that's just a stage of life that our community group is in, and that's okay.
Good. How about challenges for you guys?
Well, I think over the last couple of years, for one thing, we had, within the last couple of years, probably 10 or 12 of our group that moved out of state.
Oh, wow.
So we had a pretty big group, and every week we had, quite a few in our house. And suddenly, people just slowly started moving away.
Wow.
So that was disappointing. And I think the other thing, being an older group, some of our group have elderly parents that need help. So it's difficult for them to come.
Yeah.
We travel a lot, so we're in and out. And some of our other group have had health issues. And so consistency, I think, this last year especially has been a challenge and disappointing, because we look forward to having our group come.
Yeah.
And we want them there. We want to be together. And we have these challenges. So I think for us that's been the challenge.
Yeah.
Leanne might have a different opinion.
I would agree with that, and just would say we have room in our group at this point. So that's an opportunity too. So I think I agree with Joe in the fact that it's hard sometimes to get to the point in your group where you can share. And often at the opening, since we don't always have a meal, our opening time is often just going around and sharing about our week. And so that opens up that place where people can say, well, actually, it's been really bad.
Right.
And they can tell us why. And we can all share in that. And that is really important. And then we can pray for them at the end also. But it's maybe a challenging place to get to in your group. And I know I've been on the receiving end of that, where someone shared about their life, and I thought, wow, that's amazing of what they're going through and how they're responding to it. And then finding myself in that same position later, it really gave me a context for dealing with that situation.
Wow.
And yeah, they were ministering to me for that.
Wow.
So I think I got off topic.
And that's an example of transformation. So why don't we use that as our kicking off place for transformation? That's certainly a transformation where somebody else's spiritual journey then becomes an encouragement to us. Are there any other specific situations or people that have been in your group where they've experienced transformation or you through them?
Yeah, it's been a couple years back, but we did have some kids in our group and some younger parents than us. And oftentimes they would be facing something and we'd be like, oh, we remember going through that. And here's what happened, or here's how, God helped us with that. And I know that was a great feeling to be able to share our own life experiences and how God was there and what he did in the face of that challenge. So
Right. That's very cool.
Also, being a senior group, we all have adult children. And I think something that's helped us in particular is we realize as much as we love our adult children and are blessed by them, we don't always have all of them walking with the Lord. And that can be a challenge, and it's very hurtful as a parent. Why aren't my children all walking with the Lord? And we've been able to share different challenges in that. And, some have suffered greatly with kids that are just gone astray.
Right.
And so being able to share that, because, the truth is we don't want anybody to know about it. And we want to believe that we have the perfect family. And we don't all have a perfect family. We live in a broken and sinful world, and it's so helpful to be able to just unload.
Yeah.
And but also with that has been joy in being able to kind of move on. We can share, and it's in the open, but God brings healing through that.
Oh, very good. Excellent. How about you guys? Transformation, either in your own lives or in people in your group?
I think my experience with community groups, they have been really good, but they have not always felt personally enriching. Just to be completely honest, like we were in a group for quite a few years that everybody was wonderful, but I did not feel connected, and I did not feel like I was like personally benefiting from it. And I remember struggling with that and like just not wanting to go. And I remember at one point I felt like God just said, maybe the reason you have to go, and this is before we weren't leaders, maybe you need to go not for what you get, but for what you need to give. And
Oh, that's great.
so once I was able to accept that, like stop focusing on what I wasn't getting or what I wish I was getting, and being able to just accept, like maybe this isn't a season in life where I'm receiving, maybe I just need to be there for other people. And so I think that really changed my thinking and my perspective. And I would also challenge other people if they find themselves in that situation. Maybe, I know we talk a lot about what community provides for you and what you get out of it, and it is important. But there may be a season where you need to go not because you're getting something, but because the people need you there. And not even as a leader, but just as somebody showing up to group. Like maybe you need to go and give of yourself. And so I think that's the transformation I've seen in my own life. And then just seeing people come into our group that don't know people, and then they get to feel like they have a home. They get to feel like they're known and connected, and seeing them make friendships with other people in the group that they really needed. And so that, I think, has been really neat to go, seeing people that are struggling with issues, but they don't feel comfortable talking about it, or they just don't know anyone, and then they get connected with maybe someone else in the group that they just really click with, and they have someone that they're able to share those things with and be real with. So
That's great.
Our groups have an opportunity to work through, a number of just really difficult circumstances with people in the group, whether it's marriage or parenting and kids, just really challenging personal stuff. And so seeing not every time is appropriate in the middle of group, right, to talk about all of those things. Right. But seeing people willing to connect and willing to open up and share has been super valuable, and I've benefited from that, right? So being able to share the struggles with parenting and the frustration that I experienced there, and then having people pray for me, right? That's been transformative to be known in that kind of a capacity. Right. And then I want to go back, not go back to a previous question, but I want to make sure that your kids are welcome at my group. It's the season we're in, so if you have kids and it's a barrier, please come to mine, because I have a lot, and it's good.
And they just multiplied, right? So you have more room now.
We do. We have 3 less kids than we had before.
Just 3 less kids?
So if you have 4, you're out of luck. But honestly, a transformative thing is seeing people that have kids that don't feel like they can connect, finding a space where they're welcome. And I think we've been able to facilitate that and want to continue to facilitate that as well. Kids aren't a barrier to you being in community. And so watching people have that kind of work done in their life where they feel like they can engage and be a part of something, and frankly, where they don't have to figure out a meal on Monday nights, right? And they know that their kids are going to have fun and enjoy, and they get to connect and be adults as well as parents, right? Like, those are valuable, and so seeing people kind of open up in that atmosphere has been really transformative as well.
That's great. So one more question, kind of generally on spiritual gifts, either just something that would help us to get an idea of how you use your own spiritual gift in community group, or how you've seen some people in your community group use their spiritual gifts. Like, how has that been for you?
Well, I'm not sure I can give a specific example, but just what you had mentioned earlier about we all have different gifts, and the Bible speaks about different parts of the body, and we're all one body. We find that in our group. We're all different, and that's good. That's what's fun about it is, and relationships is getting to know someone that's different than you, and being able to grow and see how we have it in our conversations sometimes where. Somebody will just come up with something that's like, wow. Yeah. I would have never thought of that.
Profound, huh? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we find in our conversation as well, especially as the leader, I find, the nights when I feel the worst and like, man, I'm not ready for this, somehow the Lord just comes in, and at the end of the night, it's like, wow, what happened here?
Yes.
The Lord was really with us, and we really had a good conversation, or somebody really had a need that we were able to address. And so I think that's how spiritual gifts can be used, where you don't know how things are going to go, and God uses somebody's gift, uses them And
I love that because I think that creates an anticipation. We're going to get together, and we haven't got it all figured out, but when everybody gets together, they all work together using their spiritual gifts, and then we have a great experience.
yeah.
That's wonderful. You guys, maybe one of you share on spiritual gifts, or both of you, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, you talked about how community group is an opportunity for us to serve in our spiritual gifts. And there are times where I feel like the person being served the most is me. And that's really valuable to me, right? So it helps me engage. It helps me feel connected. It helps with my longevity in being a community group leader. And there have just been really practical things. We, in every kind of iteration of our group, through different seasons and different years, as people come and go, there's always been someone or multiple families that are like, let me share the hosting. Let me do a meal every week. We had kind of an every other week rotation, and another person in our group was like, I kind of want in on that. Can I do every third? Right? And so there's that level of service that just makes it easy or easier, right? To operate in a community group leader as a host, just to have people that are like, let me share this with you. And that's been hugely valuable. A specific example of maybe our group, I don't know that there was a specific person that I would attribute this gift to, but serving would be my ankle was really acting up. I had some pretty significant tendonitis in it, and it was getting to the point where I thought, in doing the research and in talking with people, I'm going to have to be in a walking boot for like 6 weeks, and then potentially surgery after that if it doesn't clear up. And on community group night, I just asked for prayer, right? And it had been going on for several weeks, not getting better, getting worse, in fact. And the next morning I woke up and I stood up, and it was just 98% better. And I haven't had a problem since. And there's just this sense
awesome.
in which you say, it seems like God did something. Like, my group prayed, and my ankle's better. So praise God. And
Yes.
and then the next week, you go back and you're like, hey, thanks, guys. This was a big deal.
Absolutely.
And it's easy to just think, well, maybe my ankle just got better on its own, but it seems pretty specific, like God did something there.
Wow.
And so God used our group in that way, which is pretty cool.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to say thank you for coming up and being a part of this. What a great learning experience it is for all of us to hear what God's doing in your group. Both groups have openings, so you guys going to be at family camp? Okay, so you can connect with them at family camp or after church and say, hey, I'd like to be in your group come community group season when we start in September, and connect with them and then come to their group. You won't regret doing that. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. I'll let you guys have a seat.